So let's talk in this chapter about short-term scheduling. Let's get organized on the short term. And this definition actually is excellent from your book. Sometimes they are vague about the 10 operations management decisions, but this time it's very precisely exactly what's written there under your eyes. The objective of scheduling is to allocate. First, you need to say who is going to do what, which machine is going to do what, and prioritize. You need to give the sequence. So you allocate and prioritize demand. You get the demand either by forecast or real customer orders, to available facilities and people and teams. That's what we are going to talk about today. And as an example, we are in Alaska, so we use Alaska Airlines, and that company has an excellent on-time record. Actually, they are the main operator of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and that airport is actually top ranking in terms of on-time departure. They reach 85.8%, and Alaska Airlines have got 50% of the domestic flights in Tacoma. You can imagine the nightmare of airplane and air flight scheduling, because there are so many ripple effects. You have a weather condition somewhere, the plane is going to be late or cancelled, but the plane was scheduled to go somewhere else after with the flight crew, and you have this, domino effect, which makes it very difficult to react and optimize and take the right decision on the fly to counter the bad environment. But Alaska Airlines managed to use the best technology with mathematical scheduling models, which are very complex, of linear programming. And they say that their last wave of technology and applications gave them a positive result of 18 million a year of saving. So we are going to look at these techniques today. If you use better scheduling, things are not going to wait. You're not going to allocate at the right time the same machine to different tasks, and one is going to wait. So you're going to have working process, flow time in excess. So a faster movement of goods through a facility means that you better use your assets, and so you lower your cost, the fixed cost. In addition, you react better. You respond to customer faster. You have faster delivery. You remember that one of the key strategies for competitiveness is response. And of course, you are going also in the same category of response. You are going to have better dependability in terms of delivery. What you commit as a time for delivery to a customer is going to happen because you control the short-term scheduling of your operations. In different sectors, it means decided different specific decisions. For Alaska Airlines, in the airline industry, it's going to be when to maintain departure timetables, where to assign the flight crews, the catering, the gate personnel, the ticketing personnel. All decision needs to be made. In a hospital, when are you going to use the operating room? When are you going to admit and schedule your patient when it's not emergency? What's about the scheduling of people, the nursing, security, maintenance staff? For outpatient, when are you going to take appointments for them? University, we are part of it. So the classroom, the audiovisual equipment, where are going to be the classes, how is the equipment is going to be allocated to specific classes requiring it, the student schedule, the instructor schedule, the different classes, graduate, undergraduate. At the Amway Center, which is this big Orlando Magic arena, the ushers, the ticket takers, the people, the food servers, the security personnel, the delivery of fresh goods, meal preparation, the games, the concerts, the arena football, all that is scheduling matter. And obviously in manufacturing, the production of goods, I don't think the purchases of material, because, that's part of inventory management, MRP. We saw that before. But actually, the task and the materials needed to perform the specific job orders, on that they need to be at the right place. So you need to move material, move people, move products, and schedule them in the right sequence with the workers. So again, let's repeat for the last time what this scheduling pipeline is and what this planning pipeline is. First, it's capacity planning. You remember we looked at processes and there are long-term decisions. Capacity planning and product planning and process planning. Then we went to aggregate planning between 3 months and 18 months. Then we disaggregated the SNOP, the aggregate plan, and created the master schedule. And here we are, short-term scheduling. That's when you are loading your work center and you are sequencing the jobs. It's called also dispatching. So you go down to the specific decision of, like in this bike shop, you see the pictures there, you assemble model 2 in work center 6 at that time after the other job. So you allocate and you sequence. There are different factors here that are part of the global decision environments where we are going to operate this allocation and prioritization. Obviously, time is important. That's going to be the key decision here, is who does what when. And, as we said before and repeating it, that's a definition, that's a good quiz question, what scheduling, allocating, prioritizing, the two things. But there are different ways to do it. You can do forward scheduling and backward scheduling, and we are going to define that. We can do scheduling with finite or infinite loading, and we can use different criteria for sequencing the jobs. Let's review those now. So forward scheduling is easy to decide when you start, because you start as soon as the requirements are known. For example, you go to the restaurant, you order a meal. Well, the appetizer probably is going to start right away. You might, for the later, if it's several courses meal, you might actually use the other one, backward scheduling for the other one. You are not going to start the dessert right away, but you are going to start the appetizer. That's forward scheduling. Same, you are the emergency room. The patient comes, you take it, because you have to deal with the situation. There is an emergency. Sometimes machine tool manufacturers, as long as the customer specify, as soon as possible. So you are going to start working, but you are not sure about the feasibility of the schedule. You are going to try to go as fast as possible. The customer might have made a requirement that you cannot match, but at least you start, you don't lose time. And because it's more difficult to plan, because you don't have planning horizon, it's not like a rational decision where you can optimize everything in advance. You start and you face the situation of the workload, the current workload in your operations there. So it might trigger a build-up in working process inventory, because this order that you push through the system might have delayed because there are going to be some equipment, some facilities, some part of the capacity is going to be already used. So backward scheduling is the opposite. The customer order with a due date, and that can be also a machine tool, because, well, the customer is going to create a new production line and he wants his stamping machine at a certain date to be installed. It's part of his project schedule. And so you are going to go backward. That's basically what we did with MRP. Remember, we were actually starting from the due date, from the final product, and moving backward to the different level of components. For that, again, you might have capacity issues, obviously, because you need to optimize globally and you're going to have multiple processes executing in parallel using the same resources. Very often, what you do, there is no fundamentalism here. It's not a matter of principle. It's a matter of efficiency. And so you are going to do a little bit of both. You are going to do some forward scheduling and some backward scheduling. I already gave you the example of the restaurant, where depending on the appetizer or the dessert, well, you don't use the same techniques. So now, the first one was about timings. We go forward or backward in terms of decided when. This one is in terms of capacity. It's, virtually a dream to plan things without making sure that you have the capacity to do things. You can define timing, but if you cannot do it, you cannot do it. So you need to look at capacity. And there are different approaches to do that. Either you do that, you will have to do that at one point. But either you integrate those constraints right away, and that means finite loading, so that you allocate to the capacity of the workstation. So all the work is going to get done, because that's why you allocate, because it's available. But the due dates might suffer from it, obviously. Either you say, no, I'm not going to care initially about the capacity, I'm just going to go for my timing decisions. And so you will have to adjust the timing, or you will have to adjust the capacities. Maybe you will have to rent material, to hire new part-timers or subcontract or go for overtime. But you will have either to adjust the timing or the capacities later in your planning decisions. So what are my criteria? What do I want to accomplish? What are the goals when I schedule? Well, I have 4 different options. I might want to minimize the completion time. I might say, well, globally all these jobs need to be executed as with the minimum time possible. I might want to maximize the utilization of my facilities. I know how important are the fixed costs for my profit, and I want to optimize and fill the capacity of my facilities there. The third option is to look at, and that's one of the key principles of the Toyota production system and modern production system, is that actually the key parameter is working process inventory. That we want to be with as close to zero inventory as possible. We want to be just in time, you remember? And therefore, the third criteria is going to be the minimization of the WIP. And now, if you are in a business where, it's so critical to deliver on time, that you can take that parameter as being your criteria. Some company like Pizza Hut, like FedEx, make that their motto, on time. And so this can be actually the defining parameters for making your decision in terms of scheduling. Depending of your process, depending of your production, you are going to have different approaches and choose among these factors and parameters we just reviewed. So that process focus is actually done for specific customized customer orders. There are a lot of variety in the routings and the parts and the fabrication, the manufacturing process that you use. Therefore, it's going to be very complex loading, and it's going to be probably due date because customer wants things at a certain time, obviously except if it's as soon as possible. And some example would be foundries, machine shops, cabinet shop, print shops, many restaurants, for the multi-courses menu. As I said, you are going to have to, if it's multi-courses, you are not going to start everything right away. And the fashion industry, because there is showtime, for example, for the announcement of the spring collection. And so you are looking at due dates. For the repetitive facilities, then you have a plan, you product on a plan, you update your forecast frequently, but you went with long-term forecasting, with an SNOP, you have a master production schedule, material requirement planning. All that gives you a framework of stability. So you can, and also your capacity. You try to fill now your assembly line. So you are going to use finite loading techniques and try between the different levels of production, final product, first level subsystems, and second level the subsystems of the subsystems, and so forth, the bill of material hierarchy. You are going to use just-in-time techniques. That's what we will describe when we talk about the Toyota production system. So production in assembly lines like washing machine, like automotive, that's going to be the case for repetitive facilities. And now for product-focused facility, the paper, the beer, the potato chips at Frito-Lay, this fixed cost, heavy in fixed cost, and dedicated equipment for high volume, low variety type of production. When here you are going to actually operate on plan, the setups, the run time, you have a strategy for inventory management and distribution management. So you are going to operate with a stable plan, stable demand, and you operate to optimize your fixed cost and the use of your facilities. Let's get back to scheduling the process-focused facilities because it's the most complex. And you can have so many different products there running through your shop. You are going to need different talent, different equipment, different materials, so different routings, different sequence of manufacturing and assembly. And so it's going to be more complex, and you are going to have a hard time not to sometimes build up a working process or having some wait time because you have a bottleneck. You remember that we look at the theory of constraints and how to optimize bottleneck. Well, they are going to happen here in your process because it comes to you and it's not planned long time in advance. You have to optimize what you have. So more complex scheduling. The name of the game in the jargon world for assigning jobs and sequencing jobs is called loading jobs. So it means you are going to assign the jobs and sequence the jobs so that cost, idle time, completion time, all that, depending of your decision parameters, are minimized. You have two ways, to load. You can be capacity oriented, so you look really at the capacity of your machine and you fill your machine, or you can have to choose between different work centers, and so the decision there is not in which sequence to load the job to a specific machine, unique machine that, I have to use, and optimize the utilization of the machine. It's going to be which job center am I going to use? Do I give that one to team A or to team B or to team C? And we'll see different examples of these two different types of loading. One thing important is in manufacturing and in assembly is to be even. If you run up and down in terms of loads, you are going to have excess capacity, you are going to have work in process when you are up, you are going to have idle time when you are down, and the cost of idle time, you are going to have the cost of the assets there, which are frozen in working process. Also, the space is going to be used, and it's going to be messy to move things around. And just the handling when you are at peak of operation, just because you have all these things going on, it's going to flow slower. So to optimize the flow, to optimize the use of your equipment, it's important to be even, to be consistent, to be stable, to be running at the same level of workload. So you have, different techniques, obviously, to do that. You can look at your capacity, use linear programming to optimize your plan, your sequencing. You can also quickly react to the situation if you know what's going on. And one way to know what's going on is when you have a workshop, so there is a gate for entry and a gate for getting out. There is a certain surface. Let's say it's a work cell, so you have a family of products which are being manufactured in that work cell with a certain sequence of machine. Well, you are going to control what comes in and what goes out. You are going to use what is called CONWIP to control the working process. And it means that when you load a job and the job is getting in the work cell, it has a card, and when it will get out, the card will be removed, will be brought back to the beginning, and you will know that you can launch another job because one job got out. And obviously you need to also to know the time required for each of these jobs. But you have a way to check at the gates, input and output, to balance the load. So let's get an example. Here it is. So we have a milling center, numerical control, digitally numerical control milling machines there. And we have a plan. And the plan you can see for a certain number of weeks there in June is to have a stable input of 280 units per week. And we plan also an output, and you can see that in the second table there in the middle. The planned output is 320. So on the plan, we were planning to output more than we input. Therefore, the working process there, the workload, the backlog of work inside the work cell was supposed to diminish. Less input, more output, the lowering of the backlog inside the work cell. Well, actually, the input didn't exactly match the plan. You can see that we have actually an input of 270 during the first week. So we are 10 less than plan. We have 250 during the second week. So we have 30 less than plan. Cumulative deviation minus 10 plus minus 30. We are at minus 40. The third week, actually, we are on plan, 280. We are on target. And the week after, we actually have more inputs than outputs. So now in terms of output, and that's the problem, is that, we are not operating at the plan, we should find out why, by the way. There is a reason. If we thought we could do 320, and that would be the effective capacity, there is no reason that we are at 270 without having something we need to fix. But that's what we do. We work right now with a throughput of 270 per week. And therefore, we are, in terms of cumulative deviation, adding minus 50 every week. So we move from minus 50 to minus 100, minus 150, minus 200. So now you can see the cumulative change in the backlog of this. We have an input of a real input of 270. We have a real output for the first week of 270 also. Therefore, the backlog is the same inside the work cell. Now, for the second week, we have an actual input of 250. The output is 270, and therefore, we have a change in backlog inside the work cell of minus 20 units, because we are going to output 20 more than we have input there. And we keep going. And you can see that doing that, you can have a real-time vision of what the workload is in your different work cell, and you can react. You can take decision. It might be you need to change the number of people working there, bring some more workforce. It can be that another equipment needs to be started, initiated that we didn't use before. Whatever. You can react, what's going on in terms of backlog in your work cells there. Another way to look at, your planning of workloads there, here are the Gantt chart. You remember we used Gantt chart for project management. So we are going to use the same way here, because what we have basically is, the workload and the sequence of operation for the week. So it's like a project plan. So let's look at an example. So you have a week from Monday to Friday. You have 4 different types of work center. One do the metal works, one do the mechanical, one the electronics, one the painting. And you can see that the first job there on Monday flows from metal work first week, the first day, Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday move to mechanical. Again, you find 349 on Thursday in electronics, and you complete it during the week. So this job doesn't have any stop and keeps flowing through the system. The orange with blue cross there are actually when you have planned maintenance, so the center is not available. So you have an idea of how you allocate the job and in which sequence, just looking at a graphical Gantt chart. You can also use it to monitor your activity, like we were doing for project management, if you remember, where you have these brackets there, which tells you the plan. The dotted vertical blue line is actually where you are. And so you can see that for A, you are on time. You are just there. For the C, for example, you can see that you are actually late because the dotted vertical blue lines there shows you that you are in advance, sorry. Actually, you can see that the completion is much after. So you are actually operating faster than planned. So now we are going to review another method to do the assignment. We are going to use a special class of linear programming models to do that. The type of problem solved by the assignment method is when you have to assign one job or one worker to one machine. So it's a one-to-one project assignment decision. And the objective, obviously, is going to be either to minimize cost or time, or a trade-off combination of cost and time. So as I told you before, we are not going to look at the fundamental math behind linear programming. We are going to use this special class here of linear programming, the assignment method, directly on an example. We are going to follow a set of rules. I'm going to tell you the rules, we will apply the rules, and it will lead us to the decision. You remember 1 to 1, one job to one machine or to one work team, or here to one individual. They are type setters. And you can see dollars in the table, so what we try to optimize here is not the time, but it's the cost. We have 3 jobs. They are named, coded, R34, S66, and so forth. And 3 type setters. Type setters have different skills, so depending on the jobs, they are going to be better at one or the other. And here are the data. We need to prioritize, to allocate this to one of them. One job to each of the type setter. And we have here the different cost. So how are we going to do that? The rules are, first, we are going to create what we call a zero opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is where you could have saved money by making the right decision and you didn't. You are losing money by not making it, by not either making a sale or by not using something that would have cost you less. So that's the opportunity cost table. So we are going to do that by creating in the table. We are going to subtract the lowest cost from each row and column. So first step, we subtract the lowest cost from each row and column. Remember that, we will apply that just in a minute. 2, we are going to draw the minimum number of vertical and horizontal lines to cover all the zeros. So we are going to draw lines to cover the zeros we created by subtracting the lowest cost from each row and column. And if the number of lines is equal either to the number of rows or the number of columns, here it's 3 and 3, so it's the same number, we are going to go to the next step. If not, we are going to redo it. If it's equal to either the number of rows or the number of columns, we are going to go directly to the conclusion. We can make a decision. If not, we are going to do the next step until we get to that situation where the number of lines is equals either to the number of rows or the number of columns. So, in the next step, we are going to subtract the smallest number not covered by a line from all other uncovered number. We are going to add the same number also to any number at the intersection of 2 lines. So you take, in the table, you look at the smallest number not covered by a line, and you subtract it from all the other uncovered numbers. When a number is at the intersection of 2 lines, you add that number to the numbers there. And then you go back to step 2, which means you draw your line and check, do I have now the same number of line as either the number of rows or the number of columns? If yes, you can make the decision. If not, you have to redo step 3. So now let's assume that you are in that situation, you can make a decision. You jump to 4, and at that time you will see we can actually make decisions. So first, here is my cost. Where is the lowest number? It's 6. So I'm going to subtract 6 from here the column. So the lowest, the 6 from the row, I subtract from 14, I get 8 for B. 6 I subtract from A, and I get 5. Now the lowest number for the second row is 8. So I subtract 8 from 10, value of B in row 2, I get 2. And I subtract 8 from 11, column C, row 2, and I get 3. And do the same with row 3. I pick up 7 and subtract 7 from 9 or 12 to get the values we have on the last row here. So now do the same for the columns. And I get to this, here I have 2 as a number. It's obviously I'm not going to subtract 0 from A and C, so column A and C didn't change, but in B I didn't have a 0, so I got the 0 by subtracting the lowest number from all cell in the column. I get the 0 now on the second row, S66, and I go to 6, from 8 to 6 on row 1, B, and from 5 to 3 on row 3 for column B. So now I draw my line. I draw the minimum number of lines to cover all zeros. I am going to get 2 lines here. One horizontal, one vertical, as you can see. That's not enough. So remember, we are going to look at the smallest uncovered number and subtract it from all the other cells. And at the intersections of the 2 lines, we are going to add it. So the smallest uncovered number is 2. I'm going to subtract 2 from the other cells there with values 5, 6, and 3. So I will get 3, 4, and 1 by subtracting 2. And now I have one cell at the intersection of the 2 lines. The value there was 3. I add it up and I get 5. So now I have a new table with a new number of zeros. I'm going to again draw my lines. And this time I can see that I can do it with 3 lines. So 3 lines is equal not only in this square, table to the number of rows, but also to the number of columns. The rule will be either or, one or the other. And so now you have clearly a way to make your decision. You can see that by assigning C to C the job R34, to B the job S66, and to A the job T50, you get to the best situation. C is pretty obvious because that's, it's the only one where the R34 will be covered with 0 opportunity cost. A, could take S66 or T50, but actually B has only 1 0 there, so B automatically gets the decision for taking and being in charge of S66, and that's it. You have now a clear decision for A. It's going to take a charge of T50. Now, if I look at the cost, the original cost for R34 was $6 if I choose C, which I did. Was for S66 it was $10 if I choose B. And if for A is going to take charge of T50 and the cost was 9, so the total cost has been minimized to 25. So now another decision you need to make is how to sequence the job. You have these work cells, you have certain number of jobs there coming beginning of the day, and which one is going to go first. You remember our factors to make decision could be minimizing the processing time, could be minimizing the working process, could be minimizing the lateness, could be optimizing the load of my facility, of my equipment, running at full capacity to minimize fixed cost. So we are going actually to use 4 different rules, and this rule match, our factors in terms of each rules, enables you to get the best decision for one of these objectives. These rules are going to be FCFS, which means first come, first serve. These jobs came in my work cell in the morning, but with different sequence, and I'm just going to take, it's like a line for service. Everybody, you open your restaurant, everybody come in for breakfast about the same time, but there is a sequence there, and that's what you will take. The second rule here will be the shortest processing time. Will be like taking the shortest breakfast order, or you want cereal, so you come first because that's the shortest processing time. Compare with the guy who like a sophisticated breakfast and complicated breakfast there. The earliest due date, this job comes with, a certain due date. The customer asks for delivery at a certain time. And so I will take first the one with the earliest due date. And the other one will be to say, well, I'm going to take the longest processing time because I better start early for those long orders. So that will be my criteria. Let's, define different performance criteria that we will use as metrics to measure the efficiency, various different parameters, different objectives for these 4 different rules. The first metric is going to be the average completion time. You remember that could be one of my objectives here, and my first objective is completion time. So I'm going to take the sum of the total flow time over the number of jobs, and I will have an average completion time. The other one is utilization metric, and this is going to be the metrics for utilizing my maximum capacity. So I will have my total job work processing time on the sum of flow time. So the equipment is going to be busy when it's processing time. I will add up the total processing time to the maximum of flow time, maximum of time it took to complete all the job. The highest ratio will tell me the highest ratio of utilization of my equipment. The average number of jobs in the system is a good metric to measure the working process. The less number of jobs you are in average in your system, the less working process you are going to have by definition. So for that, you will take the sum of the total flow time and divide by the total job work processing time. So you have the ratio between the total time, work time, and wait time, that's the flow time, over the total job processing time. And lateness, the last ratio, the last metric, will be measured by the ratio between the total late days over the number of jobs. So for job lateness, the maximum is going to be either 0 because you cannot have negative lateness, it's not late, 0. And, or it's going to be yesterday plus the flow time. Let's say yesterday was the 9th. We have 10 days to complete the job. So it will be completed on the 19th, 9 plus 10, minus the due date. Well, it was actually, planned for the 21st, and therefore I will have negative. My due date will be after the 19th, will be 21st. I will have a negative number in this second part here of the parenthesis, and so I will pick up 0. I am not late. Obviously, I end up 2 days before the due date. So that will be how I check the lateness, my formula to check the lateness of my jobs, and pretty obvious. So we are going to apply the 4 rules. For this specific example, we have 5 jobs. We have a certain time to execute the job. That's what it takes. It takes 6 days for A, 2 days for B, 8 days for C, that's the longest job, 3 and 9, 3 for D and 9 for E. And we have a due date. And the due date is here, you can see 8, 6, 18, 15, 23. We have A, B, C, D, E because that's the order in which the jobs came in at the beginning of the period. Here, there. They came in that order. So if I look at the first rule, which is precisely first come, first serve, I'm going to respect the sequence here. I'm going to go for A before B, B before C, C before D, D before E. I am going to look at my, work processing time and to add it up for the total. I have a total processing time for these 5 jobs of 28 time units. The flow time is going to be, remember, the wait time plus the processing time. So you can see the flow time for A, it's the first task, there is no wait time, it's 6. But for B, you have to add up the job work time to 6, the time it took to complete the first one. So you are going to have a flow time of 8. Same for C. It takes 8 units to be processed, but the flow time before was 8. So the flow time now is going to be 16. So you have these cumulative wait times there adding up to create a total flow time of 77. The job due date is what it was in our original table when we got the customer order. So we can look at the lateness of the job now. For A, the due date was after the completion time, 6. But you can see for B, actually, I am late by 2 days. C, we are good, 0. D, we got 4 days lateness. And E, we get 5 days lateness. So we got a total job lateness of 11. So now let's look at our ratio. Average completion time, sum of total flow time, 77 over the number of jobs. So in average, the jobs are completed in 15.4 days. Utilization matrix, total work time, 28 days, over the sum of total flow time, 77. So our equipment there is busy at a rate of 36.4%. The average number of jobs in the system, it's the sum of total flow time, 77, so over the total job work time, 28. So in average, you are going to have 2.75 jobs in your system. And the average job lateness, total late days, 11 total, over the number of jobs, 5. So in average, your jobs are late by 2.2 days. You can see here that we have the metrics to measure our objectives, the initial goals that we have described for scheduling, which means the completion time, the utilization of my equipment, the working process in the system there, and the job lateness. We have 4 excellent metrics to measure that. And so we are going to rate these different methods with these metrics and compare their efficiency versus one depending on the objectives. One versus the other objective. Which one is the most efficient? So second method. We are going to say, well, let's start with the shortest job. And you can think immediately, what is it going to be good for if I do that? If I pick up the shortest processing time as my priority criteria, well, I'm going to minimize the total flow time, because that will be the minimum time all these jobs are going to wait. I start with the shortest, so the other one will wait less than if I was starting with the longest, obviously. So I minimize the flow time, and I'm going to minimize also the number of jobs in the system, because the shortest is going to get out the first. So here you can see that the processing time is the criteria, the second column. The order is 2, 3, 6, 8, 9. So that's how we have prioritized the jobs. That will be a job sequence of B, D, A, C, E. I put the flow time on the next column. We have the job due date, and so I can look at the job lateness. The two first jobs are fine. A is going to be late by 3, C by 1, E by 5, so I have a total lateness of 9. And the total flow time is here 65. No change, obviously, for the processing time, because that's part of, the constraint, that the time it takes to do the task. So, average completion time, 65 total flow time over 5 jobs, 13 days. Utilization matrix, total work time, 28 over 65. Total flow time, 43% in this case. Average number of jobs in the system, 65, total flow time over 28, busy time, work time, that's 2.32. And the average lateness, 9 days over 5 jobs, 1.8 days. Now, third method, we are going to prioritize according to the earliest delivery date principle. So again, you could ask now to yourself, what is it going to be good at? Well, if I take the earliest delivery date, I'm going to optimize the job lateness. And that might be what I want to do, because I'm committed to delivery on time. So the processing time, again, same, total 28. The flow time, doing the same, calculations there, the cumulative wait time, I get 68. Sorry, I have the job due dates. Again, and I compare with the flow time, so the time it takes me to release them from out of my work cell, and I get a job lateness of only 6, and that's the lowest number you will get. That's what we try to optimize by following this principle. Let's compute all these metrics. So I have an average completion time of 13.6 days, utilization matrix 41, average number of jobs in the system 243, and an excellent average job lateness of only 1.2 days. So now the last one, I start with the longest processing time, and I do exactly the same, get the results here in terms of flow time and job lateness, apply my matrix again, and get the results of the matrix, which I will insert in another table, where I will be able to compare all my 4 different approaches. And you can see here that let's look at the right column, the average lateness, what's the best methodology, EDD. For the average completion time in days, the best is the shortest processing time. Utilization matrix, well, it's again the SPT actually, but EDD come close in that specific case. And the average number of jobs in the system, well, the best is SPT. So in that specific case, SPT is better. And in most cases, that will be true. that you are going to get at least two metrics with SPT, or two objectives, two goals that are going to be optimized. It's the average completion time and the number of the working process there. The flow time, the total completion time is going to be minimized. So, to recap, again, SPT, best for minimizing flow time and number of jobs in the system. If you get the shortest job out, you are going to, have the minimum number of jobs in the system overall and the best flow time for the total. The first come, first serve doesn't, you just get it random as they come, so there is no reason to be better at one metric rather than the other. But there is at least one thing that you do, which sometimes is very important, is that it looks like it's fair for your customer. In my example of the breakfast, you open the door, they all come in. Well, certainly what looks the fairest for everybody is that, well, one was there in the line first. So that's a good point about it. And EDD, of course, minimize the maximum lateness. There is something we can use also as a criteria to prioritize the jobs I have right now in process. It's called the critical ratio. You get the critical ratio by dividing simply the time remaining until the due date by the number of days remaining to work on the job. So the time remaining is the due date minus today's date, and you look at the job as it is, and you have a certain number of work days that you will need to finish up the job. So this is a short-term ratio. It's something you can do systematically every day because things happen during the day. You schedule based on certain assumption of time to be spent to complete the task, but it didn't work that way. One machine broke down. Maybe the material or the supply from your providers there was not at the right quality level. Maybe you had the delay for some other nature, some other things. So you can use critical ratio to rebalance, reprioritize, reorganize fast, quick on the short term. And by applying, let's apply that on an example to show you how it will work. We are day 25, today is the 25. We have job A, it's due on the 30th. We have job B due on 28, and job C due on the 27th. And here you get in column 3 the number of work days remaining, 4, 5, and 2. Let's compute my ratio. You can see that I have actually a ratio of 1:25 for the job A. So it's due date on the 30th. We are the 25, so I still have 5 days, and I have only 4 days of job, so I should be on time. So my ratio is 1:25. But B, you can see, actually, it's not good, because I actually have to release it on the 28. We are the 25, so I have only 3 days there. But I need 5 days to complete the job, so I have a poor ratio, 0.60. And for, you can see for C, actually, it's right on time there. I have 2 days left. And I have 2 days of work, so my ratio is 1. What will be my priority? Obviously, the lowest ratio, 0.60, is the job B, where I'm late, is going to be top today, because I don't have slack. I need to do it, and I will still be late, by the way. So, but I have what I wanted, which is a prioritization made there. B comes first, C comes second, A comes third. As I said, it's something you can use very often to react. it gives you a good online and real-time way to reprioritize based on what has happened. So you can be very dynamic for this, with this ratio. Now there is another technique that you can use for another scenario, which not one job for one resource, but here is n jobs on 2 machines, and we will use Johnson's rules. So we have n jobs and 2 machines, and we want to minimize total completion time and minimize idle time for the machines too. What rules are you going to follow? And I will explain to you why after. We are just going to follow the rules as we did for the assignment method before. So first we are going to list all the jobs and the times it takes to complete the jobs. Then we are going to choose the job with the shortest activity time. If that time is in the first work center, we schedule the job first. If it is in the second work center, we schedule the job last. Remember, in this case, the sequence of machines there is, all jobs needs to go through the machine 1, the equipment 1, before going to the equipment 2. So we'll follow that rule here. Pick up the shortest activity time. If it's the shortest activity time is in the first work center, you schedule it first. If it's the second work center, you schedule it last. And you keep doing it. Obviously, you get rid of the jobs you have allocated. You go for the next job and look at for the next job, look at the shortest activity time and follow the same, allocation to machine 1 or machine 2, depending of the time. This shortest time is for the first machine or the second machine. And you keep going until you have allocated. So, you have this configuration here, job center 1, job center 2, 5 jobs, and this completion time. The first one, the shortest time is 2, and it's for work center 2, so we put it last. The second shortest after that is 3. It is for job B. It is for work center 1, so we allocate B in first sequence. Then the next one left is 4. 4 is for the second work center, so we will put in the last slot still available there, put C just before A, and we keep doing that for D and E. So now we have our sequence. They need to go to work center 1 first. So, no mystery there, no optimization, by the way. Whatever sequence, there is no idle time. You keep the work center 1 busy by, performing tasks one after each other immediately. So it could be in any order. But where we see the optimization is when we look at the second work center there. So, following this sequence, you can see that first, B being the shortest, the idle time in work center 2, before we can start, is going to be minimized. And A being the shortest there at the end of work center 2, A being performed last and overhanging after the completion of all these fully packed task on work center 1 is going to be minimized too. So you can see that we have minimized the time there in orange and also the global completion time. We have presented a number of rules, first time, first serve, assignment method, the Johnson rules and others. But you have to remember that these are actually short term, and short term you're going to see a lot of things happening you are going to be flexible, to have to be flexible, to be dynamic. The rules are inflexible. Don't be a fundamentalist. Look at the reality of the situation and try to optimize and modify your rules based on what's happening. Second thing that limits the application of rules and requires from you to be flexible and reactive is that you actually are going to optimize your own sectors there, your own work cell, your own department. If it's for an administrative process in accounting, for example, you are going to optimize your own department, but you don't know what's upstream and what's downstream. So if there are bottleneck, if there is an urgency, if there is something happening there which is going to change the global picture, you don't know based only on what's going on for you. So you need to keep in mind that you are part of a larger system and you may be asked to expedite, for example, a specific order and change your scheduling because there is an urgency situation which just pop up in the schedule, global schedule. And also, it can even be beyond your own corporation. It can be in the customer manufacturing centers there, where there is suddenly an urgency. And or there are two situations which have the same priority on your schedule, but actually do not represent the same level of urgency. And I mentioned that before when we talk about MRP, that you might have just a wholesaler replenishing their warehouse, no big deal. There is a due date, but there is no catastrophe if it doesn't happen. But there is a situation where actually there is an urgent need in some of your customer, and he will have to lay off and shut down temporarily if he doesn't get the material at the right time. So that's another situation. So things beyond your own, sub-world there, and think also about the unexpected, because it's going to happen. To be more precise, to be more systematic, more rational, even more dynamic, because it's based on computer, you can use finite capacity scheduling based on linear programming, sophisticated mathematical program. You can even include expert system simulation to look at different scenarios, and you will use a sophisticated program to do that. That's called finite capacity scheduling, where you take in account all these different constraints that you have. You have the routing file, which task comes first and in this job sequence for this specific product. The availability of the job center, the need for maintenance, as you saw before in an example, might actually freeze 1 week in that center. So you need to look at the up-to-date real-time information about availability of resources. You also need tooling and supplies, other resources there. You can have these files online to integrate those constraints in your model. You have to know your setup time, your run time. You obviously are going to be communicate the long-term planning data with the master schedule, the bill of materials, the inventory. And you are going to have also the rules. If you want on-time delivery, well, you might favor EDD as a rule to be applied by your programs there. But you can add up expert system and simulation models. So all that will give you a complex system, and you have software program to do that, to optimize more complex situation. The screen that you can see here is from one of these tools, Lekin, Flexible Job Shop Scheduling System, and it shows you the optimization model according to these rules, the Johnson rules, as we just did before, and same situation. So what's the difference with services? Well, services differ from manufacturing for always the same reason we have been looking at now for quite a few number of situations. First, in manufacturing, machines are important, materials are important, people are also important, but machine and materials. In services, the staff is by far the most important to schedule. The inventory can be used in manufacturing, not in services. There is no, inventory and warehouse for a haircut. The manufacturing is in a context where the machine can be very intensive in some of the processes, like let's get back to our product process with Frito-Lay, for example, heavy equipment, when services are labor intensive and the demand may be variable when it's more stable for some type of situation in manufacturing. In manufacturing, you have unions, very active, and you have contracts with unions. In services, you also have some constraints, but they are more legal. They're also legal in manufacturing, but, over time, for example, in services, you want to be flexible, you want to stretch. You are going to have a need to stretch the flexibility of your people, but there are some legal limitations there. You need to pay more, and there are rules for that. And in manufacturing, well, it's a world of, the plant. There is a certain culture there. In services, maybe you are going to look more at seniority. You are women and their specific requirement because of motherhood and so forth. So you have social and behavioral issues being sometimes more important in services. We actually gave the example of hospital, and the solution here for hospital and scheduling people. You remember we have a pool of nurses that we can share between different pods. For banks, the solution will be that we have at peak time to use the managers or the bankers who deal with loans and specific questions for their customer. They will get to as a teller role during a couple of hours at peak time. And for retail stores, actually today with the point of sales terminal, we have accurate data regarding the sales volume in money, in number of transactions, in number of customers, and so you can forecast and adjust your schedule very precisely on 15 minutes intervals to get the right people, right number of people at the right time. Airline, we saw that the computer systems of Alaska Airlines and the most sophisticated mathematical algorithm bring a solution to an extremely complex problem. And when you are in firefighting or in police or emergency hotline, then you need to be able to have special contract to be able to call and the willing people to come and be on call, on duty, whenever the emergency requires it. Let's finish up this chapter now with a specific technique for scheduling. Maybe you have been actually working in coffee shop or restaurants during summer, or you got some part-time job, and you know how scheduling is important for people. So let's say you are in charge of scheduling the nurses and in a hospital, and you want to a trade-off there between having the right number of people, minimum number of people at the right time, and on the other side to have quality of work time for the employees and quality of life, and so you want to grant them consecutive 2 days for their break during the week, and to do that in the most rational way. So you can have, again, very sophisticated computer program with linear programming to do that and manage different constraints there. Or you can use more simple rules like the one we are going to look at now. For the hospital managers, they're in charge of scheduling the people and their weekends. What you will do first is to determine your staffing requirements over the period of scheduling. Then you will identify 2 consecutive days with the lowest total requirements and assign these as day off, maybe to your senior employee first. Or maybe the rule will be weekend first, for the senior employee. Or maybe the 2 lowest total requirement will be during weekend, so that will actually be the same. Third, now that you have allocated 1 staff to their consecutive 2 days weekend, you look at the new requirement and you redo the same process until you are satisfied and all your requirements have been met. So, first we said we look at our requirements. So the staff required on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is the following, 5, 5, 6, and so forth. So employee 1 has to be allocated. Maybe it's a, senior, or maybe you do that, you have a cycle there, the one who is allocated, the first choice will be last the next time, during the next period, whatever. But you look at your requirements there, and what are the 2 days with the lowest requirement, total requirement? Well, you can see that typically that will be the hospital situation, where the week starts strong, and you can see here requirements of 5, 5, peak on Wednesday, typical, 6, and then taper off and slow weekend. So here, the 2 consecutive days with the minimum requirements is actually Saturday, Sunday, 3 and 3. So employee 1 is going to be allocated Saturday and Sunday as break days, and that will be weekend days. Perfect. That's what they want. Most people want their, obviously, break during the weekend. So now, you will compute your requirement. And we have allocated employee 1 to work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we are going to deduct 1. So you can see that done for the second line. Monday requirements has been lowered from 5 to 4. Tuesday from 5 to 4, and so on. But you still have Saturday, Sunday to fully find people as staff working, because you gave it as break days, weekend, for the employee 1. So now, where are the 2 consecutive days with the minimum requirements? Here we have actually a choice. It could be Friday, Saturday, 3 and 3, or it could be Saturday, Sunday, 3 and 3 also. Probably the employee would want to take Saturday, Sunday, because again, it's weekend days for them, and for the family, it's a better choice. So let's say employee 2 gets, 3 and 3. You redo the same thing, you recompute your next level of requirement. You will still need 3 requirements, 3 staff required on Saturday and Sunday, but 1 less on the weekday. So here we are. Now, what are the 2 consecutive days? Now, undoubtedly, it's Friday and Saturday. Total is 5. I assign these 2 consecutive days as break days to employee 3, and I keep going. At the end, you can see I'm still going to have 1 requirement on Saturday, and that will be, part-timer. A part-timer coming, working only on 1 day a week, and that will be Saturday. You have solved your problem. You have a schedule for your people, they got their 2 days consecutive, and you have minimized your staff and your expenses. We have completed this chapter. We'll go next week to looking at the situation for maintenance, and then we will wrap up and conclude with the Toyota production system.